Mick Malthouse has been involved as a player and coach in Aussie rules since the early 1970s. He knows what it's like to win a premiership as a player with Richmond and the emotions of winning 3 premierships as a coach with the West Coast Eagles and Collingwood. He's often portrayed in the media as a touchy subject, short on patience and quick to retaliate when challenged. Truth be told, he's probably just got other things on his mind and sees the media spotlight as a distraction from the real thing. Mick Malthouse, 4 decades in the game is a really, really long time. When you look back at those 4 decades, what are the words that best describe the experiences you've had?
Well, I haven't had that question before, so it's the words best describe the experience. Well, you experience highs and lows. You have a lot of acquaintances. I'm loath to say you make a lot of friends because football you pass in and out of phases with people only because you go in and out of clubs. But along the way you tack on great friendships. Football's given me a great opportunity. I love the game. I love the competition. It's given me the opportunity to travel. Football's been everything for me in many respects. And I'm blessed that I have got really strong bonds with people and a family that love the game as well.
The AFL, particularly here in Melbourne, is an absolute cauldron. It takes a certain type to be able to deal with that sort of day in, day out, 24/7 pressure. Has it been because of your other interests in things like history, anthropology, the environment, that gives you that kind of mental escape to enable you to stay in that cauldron?
Yeah, it's not something been designed from the word go, because when I first started it was you played football, you worked, you enjoyed each other's company. Then as the game developed, I got into a coaching position where I was part-time coach, full-time work, full-time father, and then I became a full-time coach. And it dawned on me on early days, particularly in coaching, that you have to have life balance. Without life balance, you're not going to survive. And it was around about midway through my period at West Coast, I reckon about, and I'll say 94, 95, perhaps after the premiership in 94, that just scouting around enough, just talking to other people from particularly other codes, whether it be in America or Europe, that I come to the conclusion that people won't accept this role, but what it is, or the term, but it is manager. And I really manage my coaches. And by that, I give them authority and I give them ownership. So therefore, when they're on board, they take over a lot of responsibilities. I reckon the reason why I've lasted at clubs without being stale is because to release and trust people with jobs and tasks, then I can actually focus in on the people. And if you can manage the people, then you have a great opportunity to go forward. But then there's the other side of things. And I think most people who talk to me now would say, well, you get a bit about football and you get a bit about the politics and you get a bit of overseas stuff and we'll delve into history. Some like it, some don't, but it keeps me sane. And I reckon that the life balance has been the crucial part, particularly from that period I said, because football is very absorbing. And if you let it take hold, and I've seen it with people before, they become brain dead because they aren't able to relate anything else but football. A lot of people these days, particularly football, young footballers coming through, they look for more in life than just the game. And I'll surprise you by saying this, and I'll surprise a few journalists who don't believe in what I'm saying. A lot of footballers do not watch the football. They get so saturated through the week, they want a release. So we have to do a lot of their work for them. So when you do that, both as in video evidence and strategies and so forth, you've got to find some relief. And I just mentioned to you before, I walk to work, it takes me about an hour, and half hour of that's football and half hour is listening to the BBC or ABC or Al Jazeera or my music.
There's a number of things there that I was going to ask you about, one of them being that term manager. I know that you met the great Sir Alex Ferguson and he made quite an impression on you, but I've often wondered why we don't call our coaches managers.
Yeah, we don't let go of terms easily. In America it's coach, and yet they do the identical thing that I say I do, and that's manage a very big team. The American coaches in Gridiron are, I've had the opportunity to go through their football clubs, and you can sit at a table like this and it's occupied by all coaches. There could be 10 to 15 coaches. So technically speaking, I see him as a manager of those coaches more so. But it's a term, I think we all relate to the term. I have no wish to be manager of the club. I believe strictly that the hierarchical thing of a football club should be respected and honoured. And then my job is one part of that football division. So therefore, I believe that the correct term is manager of my coaches. Now, I don't think a young coach should take that on. He should be a coach and understand he should be standing on the door He should peel the oranges. He should be everything he possibly can until he masters everything. Then he should come back away and go, OK, now I trust these people.
You talk about trust a fair bit, and I just wonder how easily you trust people.
That's a good question. I think we're not victims of the past, but we are made from the past. And as a young bloke, my father was struck down by a paralysis when I was 12, and I was moved from house to house, only because my mother wasn't coping. And I was very untrustworthy of people. I couldn't understand people at that stage, what their motive was and, where things were heading. So I suppose instinctively didn't overly trust people all the way through. But when people displayed trust and I accepted that trust and they accepted mine, I reckon that I took that on board pretty strongly. And once I get people's trust, I believe that is absolutely the criteria of anyone going forward in a sporting organisation that has multiple partners, that you have to have that trust. And when that breaks down, I think nearly everything else breaks down. Because in a football club like this, we have our 42 players, but we have 20 odd staff. Now, you can't function if one of those is out of sync with you. The word trust is absolutely paramount in my system because it means that I have my back covered and I'll cover anyone else's back.
Given that, in the last couple of years, 2013, 2014, the Asada saga, what do you think that has done to the future of trust between clubs and coaches and the players? Because it's almost as though players who've committed so much trust in people are now being told, well, don't. Question everything. And I wonder how that impacts on a team sport.
Yeah, well, it's a touchy subject right now because it's not conclusive. So, or it hasn't been concluded. I think it's conclusive, but it hasn't been concluded. First and foremost, every player that comes through your door is semi-compromised in some respect because we rob them of their youth. We tell them they've got to drink alcohol in moderation and certainly not in certain days. You've got to look at your weight. You've got to protect yourself by not being in certain areas at certain times that put you into trouble. You do not break any rules that will put you into conflict with the club's principles, etc., etc. So it is not a prison. It's not an advanced school. It is simply a football club that has high demands, and in our society, people are going out of their way to find a flaw in a person or a club, and it becomes headline. So we are doing a lot of work with our players to ensure that they are model citizens at 17, 18 years of age when they should be probably just living their life and still being model citizens, but not being kids. So if those players have that trust in us, we have an absolute right to get things in perspective that everything that we do is for the player's advancement to make him a good footballer, but more importantly, make him a good citizen of our society. So therefore, again, I won't go too deep in it, but having courses outside of the football and job opportunities, etc., and living in a good home and so forth. When the trust is broken, a lot of that's very, very difficult to get back. The saga at Essendon, I'm not privy to a lot of things that have taken place, nor am I privy to how the players feel about it. But your obligation as a football coach is to ensure, 1, safety, 2, opportunity, and 3, that they become better as the years go on in your custody, if you like. So in other words, player enters in, I'll say to the parents, I'd like to think, you might think you've got a wonderful son, this sort of stuff, but we would like to make him better. And how do we do that? Through education, through giving him opportunity. You don't want to break that trust. I think once you break that, it might be broken with that player, but that spreads throughout the organisation. And trust is fundamental for any organisation to go forward.
The title of your book is The Ox is Slow, but the Earth is Patient. Who chose that title and why? Well,
it's something I said many years ago when I was at West Coast, and it was, I mentioned about my father. My grandfather became my mentor in many respects, even though I didn't see... when we had the good little time, he came into Ballarat and spent some time, because my grandmother died at the same time, so my mum was under a massive pressure. And he taught me a lot of things, particularly about nature and that sort of stuff, and he tried very hard to teach me about patience, and I failed, right? So as I got on, I thought, the ox is slow, the earth is patient, really is reflective of youth, of us having the patience to develop the youth. Now, he may be slow, he may be very slow in developing, but the earth is me, you've got to have that patience. The ox is the player, the earth has got to be us having the patience. I agree with it, I find it difficult, And once we wrote the book, and you know the reason for the book was written, because a very dear friend of mine who now works at this football club lost his son in the suicide, and we decided to write a book for our families on life balance. And it grew from there. In fact, it got to the stage where we thought, well, we've got to share this with people, because we're very proud of the book, because it is about getting things in perspective and making sure we don't ignore the little signs that exist there. Will it be our last foray into writing books? No, because I think the next one we've got to write about is moving on, because both of us have moved around a bit, and there's a lot of people who move from one organisation to another or move on and don't find something else. And it's the same principle. There's a little bit of patience and there's a little bit of weathering it, and, don't wear things too heavily. Just weigh up the balance of life.
You talk in there about really understanding what your weaknesses are in order to really develop your strengths. I often wonder whether it's your greatest strength also acts as a bit of a mirror and becomes a bit of a weakness. If you look at your playing career, your great strengths were quite defensive. And I wonder if there's that certain defensive part of your nature, which is not a criticism, but has sometimes led to the misunderstandings, sometimes the hostile environment that you find yourself in media conferences.
That's a good way of putting it. Well, I totally agree with you. And another analogy, I'd say Damien Martin, the cricketer. His greatest strength, he would make many, many runs through the gully. But you can bet your bottom dollar he'd be caught in the gully. So his greatest strength become his greatest weakness, or his point where he was weakened. And that can be said about quick bowlers. Johnson now is regarded as one of the best in the world. You can bet your bottom dollar he'll try to bounce you out at some stage, and he'll take some wickets with that. Someone will get hold of him one day and just clip him over the top for six, and once he's learned it, so his strength could well become his weakness. And we see that so regularly through sport and in life. I have no doubt your strength gets you into more trouble than your weakness. So it's a matter, you've got to be able to see if you can balance it out. Now, I can't help my Irish on one side and German on the other, combining and giving me a little bit of irrational thought from time to time.
That's also a good way of putting it. As a sport in general, not just the AFL, but sport in total, it's become so professional. The levels of expertise are in every sort of step of the way. Do you think that sometimes part of the sports machine is working against other parts of the machine? And in some regard, I'm talking about the media there as well, because so much of the money in the game comes down to broadcast rights, and yet the influence of the media, which actually has nothing to do with the way the game's being played or what happens at the moments that count, but the media's influence becomes quite crucial.
Well, it does. Let's take the game from my 1972 start, and perhaps even going to 1983 as a coach. I think there was 37 accredited journalists. Now there's 1,300 or thereabouts. I fear that we try to short-circuit the truth to get a back page. I am Vice-Chancellor's Fellow at La Trobe, and one of the areas that I do lecture in there is journalism. I take Christy, my daughter's point, that you've got to source the information, go through the information. Do you want to report the information, or do you want to be the information? And let's go back to the sport. We have the performers, clearly the players. To have our game the way it is, we need supporters watching the game, which we have in mass numbers. For the public to know a bit more about the game and to watch it at home if they can't go to the game, we need a media contingent that's reporting on it pre and post. The combination has to exist. Has to exist. I'm first to acknowledge, and contrary to what some may say, some of my best friends are in the media industry. I believe that first and foremost there's got to be another word for respect. If I get respect, I'll give respect back. If there's no respect, then it's hard to be what they want, right? But we can't do without each other. I'm one part of preparing the artists or the performers for it. There's an obsession about looking at coaches and dissecting coaches. The people do not go to watch the coach. They go to watch the players.
No, the media go to watch the coach, some parts of it.
Some do. But my job is to get the performers out there at their best for my members, our Carlton members in this case. They will go and watch it. or they will go and watch it at home, or they'll listen to it, or they'll read about it. So therefore, of course, we all connect to one another. But I think the fundamental thing is the media can exist to a degree. The sport itself, if that's not in existence and the performers aren't out there, then you watch that 1300 go back to 37 very quickly. So we have this trilogy, if you like. We all rely on each other. And let's put in perspective, some people in that fraternity are now trying to become the superstars, and their skin is very thin. I say that let's keep the focus on the performers.
In a football team, you can have players from a multitude of backgrounds. Some may be illiterate, some may have double degrees. You've got to meld those players into a team that's all after one common goal. You've had that success a number of times at the West Coast, a lot, of course, at Collingwood. How difficult is it to do that? And when those moments all come together at the right time, how much of that is planning and commitment, and how much of that is something else that you've got no control over and you don't know where it comes from? That
is a great question, and I think the one answer that we might just go to the end point. And a classical case is your double degree. I don't know. I've coached a player recently with a double degree, and I've coached a player recently that has difficulties in reading. So they play together. They might bang into each other in the street, and there'll be an acknowledgement only, because their lives are poles apart. I view football clubs like this. If I got the Carlton team and said, OK, boys, put the red jumpers on if you're a Catholic and put the blue jumpers on if you're not, and we'll play a game of soccer together. They go hell for it. They go hell for it. I said, no, OK, now half-time we'll change it over. Those that are 17 to 25 put the red on, and 26 to 36 put the blue on. They go hell for it, because what binds them is the jumper. So this Carlton Football Club jumper has, roughly the last game, has blokes who are 31. A 31-year-old has been in the game since he kicked the ball at 5, to a 23-year-old Irishman who's just played his 18th game of football, 4th in AFL and 14 reserve games. What brought him over here? They're wearing the same colour, so they'll fight for one another on the ground and they'll do everything they possibly can. Off the ground, do they mix? Probably not, because I've put that association down to a mixture of, we're assembled in this room, we all have lifelines. The ups and downs of life determine where we are. The more downs you have, then you've had a few bumps along the road, but if you get to the central line again, you've probably become stronger because of that hiccup than the little highs. The highs are just momentarily moments in life where you can take a deep breath and go, oh, I've achieved something. So the shorter that is, the less you've learnt. The longer it is, you've learned a lot and you've probably gone through a lot more. What binds us is the colours. We want to play football, we bring them in from drafting them and this sort of stuff. Then it gets down to management. How do you get them on the one track fighting for one single thing? And if you've got the abilities, then clearly the goal is a premiership. I've played in them and I've coached them. I hardly mix with, one of my best mates is in fact a player I played a premiership with. And he's been part of my premierships at West Coast, and I hope he's part of one here at Carlton. My other best mate, I feel had two, I played with him for a couple of years at St Kilda. He went to Richmond. He left. I went to Richmond. He left. So the connection dropped away. It's the chemistry mixes with people and you have this massively great bond. The other one is just a medal to wear on your neck because you're part of a team that won a premiership, and you meet every now and again and you rub shoulders and you go back over old times. But reality is when you walk at that door, you have different lives. The idea of getting success out of that group is have one single goal and work a way down to what it means to each of them. Because for one kid, football's everything. To the other kid, it's a good means of getting a nice home. I'll get my degree on the way through and I'll go forward after football. The other kid says, I've got no idea after football. It's the unpredictability of sport that keeps us all watching, and it's the unpredictability of life that also teaches us how we overcome obstacles and try and get to the goals that we've set for ourselves. People often talk about sport providing those sorts of lessons in life. So if it's possible for people from everywhere, all sorts of backgrounds and beliefs to come together and fight for that one goal, why hasn't life outside sport learned how to do that as well? when you get to this level of sport, elite sport, not only AFL, it could be the EPL, it could be the national basketball side in America, it could be the hockey sides in Canada, whatever the case is. There becomes an elitism about it. Okay, it's an elite sport, so therefore you're only in that side because you're an elite player, and you will quickly lose that role if you don't stay at an elite performance. It's the hardships that I reckon you learn more from hardships and the tough disciplines that drive you. They're the things that make top people. Talent is a blessing. I've said to players before, go home, kiss your mum, shake your hands with your dad and thank them for their DNA, because that's you. That's your talent level. What goes above that talent level is your guts and determination and your drive. Now, that may also come from your parents, but it's got to be extracted and you've got to drive it. And I think, is it harder for Roger Federer to be a champion or Manchester United to be a champion side? Clearly, it's easier for Roger Federer because he's only got himself to look after. He doesn't have to worry about his teammate down the back end, maybe going out on a Thursday night before a Friday game and you think, he's going to be at 90%, and I'm worried about him because he's got a bit of a crook ankle, and I don't like him because he doesn't particularly adhere to the game plan. The more moving parts, the more problems. And that's what I love about this challenge. Why doesn't it happen outside? Because I think the hardships bond you. They bond you together. They make you remember that this is not an easy path. And no grand finalist, no premiership side in the world, it does not fall on their lap. They have to go through some very, very hard and tough moments to determine whether they really want to go through that process. Because I don't think it's... Ask me as a coach, ask me as a player about the premierships. As a player, it was all joy and bubbly and fantastic. As a coach, it was great relief that we're able to get all the moving parts together, and they got there, and we got over the line. And none of the grand finals I can tell you what the result was in terms of points. I just know we won. I just know that the relief was like, just give me a bucket, I want to fall into that bucket, and you can carry me out. Because the harder things are, the more people fall out. And that's society. That when you make things tough, watch them fall away. And that's why elite sport holds up the elite people, because they keep pushing the boundary. I can categorically tell you, I've never looked out the window and yet and thought I've stood on that top of that mountain. And I don't even know what it's going to even look like, and I probably will never ever get there. And I would say that's for 90% of sports people, that that's a strive to get to a top, but they rarely, if ever, get to it.
You write in your book that everything has an end, and even though that's what's inevitably in store for all of us, we still haven't really figured out how to deal with it when we get there. And I wonder if that's why you came back after Collingwood. You had some time out. You've come now to Carlton. Was it that desire to go round one more time like the great boxers? Is it a thrill, both highs and lows, that nothing else in life can give you like sport gives you?
That's again, a good question. I'd hate to be likened to some of these boxers because I've never seen them actually succeed. They almost get to the stage where they've achieved a championship. And this is the thing I was talking about before. Have they achieved a championship and a world championship belt? And is that the end? Is that the end point? And then they think, well, I'm in the wilderness now. Where do I go to from here? I heard some disturbing stats during the week that Test cricketers have a much higher rate of incidence of suicide than the normal public. Is that because when it finishes, it hasn't finished? When I left Collingwood, I didn't think I was anywhere near finished, and regardless of age. I take exception to people drawing a conclusion on an age. I think Manchester United, for instance, have just appointed a 62-year-old or 65-year-old Dutchman. I dare say his life, you could say, when you look at his record, you could say, well, I'm satisfied I can stop. It's got nothing to do. Do the top business people of the world stop because they think that an age is a barrier? I don't know. Getting to that question is, to come back, I didn't feel fulfilled finishing. I don't know whether that will take place. I've said to each of the presidents of every club I've been at West Coast, at Collingwood, and I'll say it here, I don't think I've said it to Mark actually, if I wake up one morning and I feel satisfied, that once I have satisfaction, I think I should give up. Because I think that what drives you is being unsatisfied, being unfulfilled. And when this job was offered to me in August, September of 2012, I wanted to make sure my family were satisfied with it, but I had no hesitation in thinking I could coach. And I knew that wasn't going to be easy, because the easy path is not my path. And it's going to be tough, but the tougher it is, and you can hang in there long enough, then you turn places around. But it's like a hunger. You've just got, there's no, we talk about endpoints. I can't see an endpoint, but I know there's going to be an endpoint. How am I going to respond at the end of it? I fear it a little bit, but you've got to be prepared for it. But under no circumstances was I finished at 2012.
Mick Malthouse, despite what people say, I think we could talk for hours. Thank you very much for your time today.
Tracey, thank you. It's a pleasure.
I'm Tracey Holmes. Thanks for your company. See you next week.
The Ticket.